A Flash in the Dark, Chapter 10, Back in Starling. Barry ran, faster than she had before, racing down the thankfully mostly empty road. 3 minutes into her run, she smelled smoke and paused in the middle of a deserted highway. Her jacket was smoking, and she ripped it off and tossed it aside as it went up in flames. Dr. Wells's words still echoing in her ears as memories of that horrible night flashed through her mind. Tears welled up in her eyes as everything from the past few days crashed over her. She glanced over at the sign near her, 60 miles to Starling City. She raced off again, ignoring the sparks coming from her shoes, Joe's shouts against herself and her father, and the death of the man in the accident pulled at her as she raced through the city looking for someone. She didn't find him in the city, so she raced out to the Queen Manor. She was holding back sobs by the time someone opened the door, not to mention her shoes were smoking. Oliver had just gotten home for the night from patrol as the Arrow. It had been surprisingly quiet. Thea was still at the club, Diggle was at headquarters training with Roy, and Felicity was working on upgrading their systems again. Oliver was just contemplating bothering Joe West to see if there was any change in Barry's condition when there was a banging on the door. He grabbed one of the knives he had hidden around the house as the banging sounded again, and he made his way to the door. He wasn't expecting anyone out here this late, and it wasn't as if the manor was a prime spot for anyone to stumble upon. The knife clattered out of his hand when he opened the door. Oliver? Barry Allen stood in his doorway, out of breath and crying. Oliver opened his arms and Barry buried herself into his chest and sobbed on his doorstep as he ran his hand through her hair trying to take deep breaths.
"Oh my God, Barry, you're awake. How did you get here? Your shoes are smoking,"
Oliver asked, pulling back, trying to understand what was happening here. Barry hiccuped a laugh and held on a little tighter. Oliver pulled her closer, burying his nose in her hair and inhaling as she sobbed into his chest. "It's a long story. I needed someone to talk to. Something happened, something impossible," Barry managed, her voice slightly muffled by his shoulder. Oliver stepped back slightly, his hands moving from her hair to her hand. "Please, come in. I can't believe you're actually here," Oliver said, pulling her inside. Barry was still sniffling as Oliver led her up to his room and settled her on the spacious couch. She wasn't wearing shoes. How had he missed her taking them off? He wrapped her up in a blanket and told her to wait. He wasn't generally good with upset people, but he figured if he did what he normally did for Thea, they could go for them there. He made a quick cup of hot chocolate and took the fire extinguisher to her shoes, which were smoldering outside. He headed back upstairs and found Barry curled up under the blanket, sobbing. He set down the hot chocolate and wrapped his arms around her until she managed to calm down.
"Barry, what happened? Last I heard you were still in a coma."
"The lightning from the accelerator, it changed everything," she said, lifting her hands, which were shaking, moving so fast they blurred. Her explanation was fast, almost too fast for him to follow, but he did manage to get the gist of it. Her hero, Harrison Wells, had shot her down cold. According to him, she was just some girl who was hit by lightning.
"Barry,"
he said, carefully maneuvering her so she was sitting nearly in his lap. Barry sniffled into his shoulder. "What if Wells is right? What if I'm not cut out to be a hero? What if I'm just some girl who got struck by lightning?" she asked, tears choking her voice. Oliver tilted Barry's face up gently so she was looking at him.
"I don't think that lightning struck you, Barry. I think it chose you,"
Oliver said, brushing the tears off her cheeks. "I don't know if I can do what you do. I don't know if I can be a vigilante like you," Barry admitted, shaking her head. Oliver brushed her hair out of her face.
"No, you can do better. You can inspire people, watching over your city like a guardian angel, saving people in a flash," he said.
Oliver didn't realize just how close they'd gotten until Barry smiled. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to back out. Instead, she leaned forward, meeting him halfway. It was slow and deep, and neither of them backed off until they needed air. Oliver grinned.
"Take your own advice. Wear a mask," he teased.
Barry grinned as Oliver wiped her eyes. "Speaking of, how does that fit? I never got the chance to see you in it," she teased back. Oliver smiled down at her. There was something gleaming in her eyes, something that made him pull her closer.
Maybe if you stay the night, you'll get that chance,
he said, no small amount of heat building in his voice. Barry laughed and nodded, leaning in again. The next morning, Oliver rolled over and grinned wide, looking into the sleeping face of Barry Allen. He could get used to that sight. Her hair was a complete mess. He had been right that it would be very enjoyable to tangle his hands in. It was longer than it had been before the lightning. He ran his hand through her hair, and she hummed lightly, snuggling into his side. He laughed.
How did your hair not get completely tangled running here?
I have no idea. There's a lot I have no clue about these days, though. Barry traced one of the scars that ran across Oliver's abs. There was a faint buzzing, and Barry groaned, turning over. Then she caught sight of the clock and swore. She raced over to her discarded jeans and pulled out her phone, which was still ringing. "Hello?" she asked. There was an exasperated sigh from the other line. She'd know that sigh anywhere. "Hey, Joe." She could practically hear her foster father rolling his eyes.
"Where the hell are you, Barry?
And you better not lie to me this time," he asked. Barry flinched like a teenager caught in wrongdoing. "I'm at a friend's house," Barry said, glancing over at Oliver, who was looking amused from where she'd left him on the bed. Joe sighed.
"And that's code for you having sex, isn't it? Never mind, I don't want to know. All I want to know is when you're showing up for work,"
Joe demanded. Barry was blushing bright red, and Oliver couldn't help the laugh that bubbled up in his chest. "I'll be to work on time. I'm not in until 1 anyway," she said, flipping Oliver off, making him snort again. Joe sighed.
"I'm sorry about what I said to you yesterday,"
her foster father began. "Look, Joe, I don't want to talk about it right now. I'll see you later, okay?" Barry cut him off, running a hand through her hair. Oliver frowned from his spot under the covers as Barry hung up on her foster father. She came and snuggled back under the covers next to him. He wrapped his arms around her.
"You okay?"
Oliver asked. Barry nodded as he ran his fingers through her hair again. She laughed. "You really like my hair, don't you?" Barry teased, looking up. Oliver nodded. Then a grumbling echoed through the room, and Barry blushed bright red. "Hungry?" he teased, right back. Barry hit him lightly before looking up at him, smiling. "Yes," she pouted. Oliver held her close for another moment before smiling and kissing her again.
"All right, breakfast before you head back then.
And you're gonna need new shoes," he pointed out. Barry laughed. Then jumped and tumbled off the bed as someone knocked on the door and shouted, "Ollie, you have a meeting today, remember? Felicity said you weren't answering her calls. I'm coming in," Thea called. The door opened before either of them could do anything about it, and Thea Queen walked into the room. Barry snatched the top blanket off Oliver's bed and wrapped herself in it, leaving Oliver with just a sheet. Barry was bright red as she peeked over the bed. Thea laughed. "It's been a while since I caught you like this, Ollie," Thea crowed. Oliver scowled and chucked a pillow at his sister. She dodged and laughed. "At least you seem to have dislodged the stick up your ass." "Wait, is that Barry Allen? The girl you went to see in Central after she got hit by lightning?" Oliver threw another pillow as Barry waved. "Hello. I don't think we ever actually got to meet. I am Barry, yes." She was blushing bright red as Thea pulled her to her feet, still wrapped in the blanket. "I'm Thea Queen. Nice to meet you, Miss Allen." "Maybe we can have a proper talk over breakfast," Thea said, waving slightly. Barry blushed brightly as Thea tossed a pair of pants at Oliver. "Come on, Felicity will kill you if you're late. And it is your company after all." Barry frowned at Oliver as Thea left.
"My mother died in the attack Deathstroke launched on Starling,"
Oliver admitted. Barry reached out and grabbed his hand, squeezing gently.
"I'm so sorry, Oliver,"
she said, squeezing his hand again. Then she grinned and zoomed over to her clothes and dressed at super speed. She grinned at Oliver as he started to dress. "Hurry up, Slowpoke. Felicity will probably kill you if you're late. And I doubt even I would be fast enough to save you. Plus, I'm pretty sure your sister wants to give me the 3rd degree." Oliver laughed and got dressed.